Hi everybody, and welcome to Stalking the Wild Autoharp. This week we're finally going to cut into how to cut felts. And you might want to stick around till the end of this video because I'm going to talk about some of the problems that can come up when you refelt that nobody else talks about. So stick around for that. Why would you ever want to cut felt on your cord bars? Well, a couple of things come up. One is wear and tear. Autoharp felt doesn't last forever. This is where the rubber meets the road, or where the felt meets the strings, and it pushes down and pushes down and pushes down and pushes down, and depending on you, depending on how hard you push, depending on how much you play, you might end up needing to change your felt in a year. I change about once a year. Some harps that I play less, it's more like once every 5 years. So it just depends on you and your playing habits. Or you might decide to change your string schedule. That's a topic for another video. You take a chromatic and you turn it into a diatonic, or you take your chromatic and you thread up the bass strings heavier so that you get more bass notes out of it. And if you change your stringing, then you have to refelt your chord bars. How do you know when you need to refelt? Good question. Well, you don't. The first time, it's going to be hard to know. What you do is you figure out which chord bars you use the most. Say it's, very commonly, it's C, G, and D, major. Take those out and have a look at them. And if they're very deeply grooved, and I wish I could show you some grooved felt, but I unfortunately didn't save it, and I've already redone this chord bar. But it will have grooves where the strings ride across it. Now, a little bit of grooving is actually pretty groovy. A little bit of grooving you want. But if the grooves are deep, then you're getting to the place where you're going to start noticing the pressure that you have to push is more, and it's getting a little bit muddy sounding, or it feels a little bit like you're walking through mud as you play because it's slowing you down. It's kind of a vague feeling, but after you've done it once, after you have changed and gone to fresh felt, then you'll know the difference between old felt and, oh, new felt. So, hang in there, check your felts, and if necessary, refelt, and then you'll know the feeling when it rolls around again. That's all I can say, because somebody over here might play 5 hours a day. Somebody over here might play 5 times a month or 5 times a year. It's it's up to your playing. So unfortunately, I can't advise you on that. But you're going to have to strip off the old felt. Just take a box cutter knife like this, carefully, and just drag off all the old felt, and there will be glue left, or more likely tape. In order to take that tape off, you can kind of roll it off if it'll come. If you have to use a chemical, what I do, if I have a metal chord bar, is I take nail polish remover, specifically the acetone kind, and take a pan, like a little loafer or lasagna pan, pour some acetone in it so it makes a little puddle. That's all you need, is a little puddle. Take your chord bar, there's going to be adhesive residue on one side of it, hold it by the button, and dip it in the acetone. You can actually leave it sitting there and make a little lineup of your chord bars that you're going to change. Then take them out, zip off the old adhesive. It'll just come right off with a butter knife. And then rinse your chord bar. Keep the acetone off there because when you put on new adhesive, you're not going to want the remover on there anymore. You gotta wipe that off real good. All right, use paper towels, rinse it off. Keep the water away from any wood. Really important. If you're using Oscar Schmidt cord bars, they're metal. There's no wood on them. But you want to keep the acetone away from any plastic or wood surfaces. If you have wood cord bars, it's a little bit more dicey. I've actually used acetone very shallowly, dipped it in there. Goo Gone is much milder. Goo Gone is made out of lemon oil and orange oil and stuff like that. And it's available at most stores, and it will remove your adhesive. But one of the best things you can do is just be patient and peel it off. But you want to get off as much of that adhesive as possible. Then when you've got blank cord bars, no adhesive remains on the cord bar, just the button and the metal bar. This one is a Dago bar. You're going to want to put new felt on it. New felt comes in rolls. You can buy it by the roll, although the roll doesn't usually hold together for very long. Felt, you can buy it by the roll, or you can just buy strips. How many are you going to buy? Well, I recommend, if you're changing a 21 bar harp, get 22 to 25 strips, just in case you make a mistake, especially the first times. However, as I said, you don't always have to refelt all of your bars. Sometimes it's just the 3 main ones or the 4 main ones that you have to do. However, there is a problem that can arise around refelting just 4 bars. All right, and I'm going to tell you about that at the end of the video, so stick around and watch that. I'm just going to peel this one off, this one. I have 3 cord bars that I'm doing. This is cut to a length of 10 inches. The actual length that you need is more like 9.5 if you're doing a 37 string Autoharp. If you're doing a 36 string Autoharp, it's going to be less. If you're doing a wider harp, and some harps are wider, you're going to need it to be longer. So I cut mine to 10 inches, which gives me a little bit of extra, and then I put it just shy of the hole on one end like that. And then using a finger on each side of the bar, here and here, as guides, and one on top to push it down. I just push it down like this, and that centers it as it goes on. And then it's a good idea to push it down. Pete Daigle showed me a trick where you take the corner of your workbench or your table, put it on the corner of the table, and just go zip along the table. Now I'm going to show you how to put this on a harp and how to mark it. So let's go look at that. All right, so one of the first things that you want to do when you're going to do a felt job is you're going to want to label all of your strings correctly. So what I do is I put a strip of tape down here at the bottom and I label every string, and you got to make sure to get it all correct, because if you mislabel the strings, then you're going to cut the wrong grooves in your felts. But I've already pre-done this so as not to take a lot of time in my video, but I've got labels. I don't know if you can see them in the video. They're right along here. This bar that I'm going to cut here is going to be an A7, okay? Now, you have to either know the notes that are in an A7 chord, or you have to go look it up. You can Google it, what notes are in an A7 chord. Or you might have a chart or some flashcards like I've told you to make in other videos. In any case, you've got to know the notes that are in the chords. So at this point, it becomes sort of easy. I know that in the A7 chord, there is an A, a C sharp, an E, and a G. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mark those all along this edge with a Sharpie. Now there's one other rule, and that is what note goes in the bass. You want as the lowest notes possible in the chord, but there is a pecking order in, and it goes like this. If the lowest note can be the root of the chord, in other words, the chord name, then have that. If you can have a lower note that's the fifth of a chord, that's okay too. Generally, you don't want to have the third of the chord in the bass, unless you only have the option, if it will give you a low note and all the other notes are up high and you have a third that you can put in the bass, then it's okay. But to your ear, it might not be. So you have to kind of try it and see. In this case, I happen to know that in an A7 chord, it's okay to have an E in the bass. That's the fifth. All right? So on my harp, E is the very bottom string. On yours, it's probably not, but on mine it is. So what I'm going to do, I push this button down against the felt, and I'm going to mark the E note. Just like that. And then, on my harp, the next note is an A. So I'm going to mark that one too. Okay? The next note is a B. That's not in my A7 chord. Then I've got a C. That's not in an A7 chord. A D. That's not in an A7 chord. Here's another E. So I'm going to mark that. All right? Then I come to an F sharp and a G. G is in A7. Now all of this requires eyeballing and sighting along the string. You look from the letter down here and then you trace along up to the felt and make sure that you mark the right one. Okay? Now if you don't mark the right one, and you catch yourself later, because I do suggest before you cut the notches, check your work. So go back through and check everything. If you messed it up, just put an X and mark the right one. It happens. We get cross-eyed after we're doing 21 chord bars like this. All right, so you can fix it. Nothing is carved in stone. Even if you cut a notch out, and you have to go and glue that notch back in. That works pretty well. So save your divots. If you're going to cut out little triangles later, save them because you might have to glue one back in. But in any case, G is in the A chord. Okay, they're all marked. Now I'm going to check my work. We've got E, A, E, G, A, C sharp, E, G, A, C sharp, E, G, A. And then none of the top strings are in the chord. So that's how they get marked. Now I'm going to show you how to cut them. Okay, now I want to show you how to cut the felts once you have the bars marked. Now I usually go through and I mark all the bars first, and then I cut the felts. It just depends on how many you have to do, and you can do it in any order. You can mark one and then cut it, mark one, cut it, or you can mark them all and then cut them all. It doesn't really matter. It depends on what works for you. All right. Now, for 30 years, I have held the bar in my hand like this and cut the felts like this. And it works great. But John and Greg at Daigle Auto Harps made this for me. It's a little jig that the button goes down into, and it's like a cutting board. And it's great because it gives you that much pushback underneath to hold and push up against the bar, and it just kind of steadies everything. Use a good sharp blade, and let me tell you, each blade is good for about maybe 2 felts, 2 chord bars, and then you're going to want to change. So have plenty of good sharp blades handy, and just go through and you're going to cut a V around that. And if you can cut the V so that the mark is at the top of the V when you take the divot out, like that. That one doesn't really look standard because it's at the very end of the felt. If you can cut the felt so that the mark is just at the top and the groove doesn't go all the way up to the bar, that's even better, because then you have continuous glue running the entire length and it's never broken by a cut or a groove. Sometimes you can't cut it like that, and that's okay too. So there we have it. That's an A7. And now I'm going to put it back on the harp and test it. And I'm going to listen and see if there's any leaks. Are there notes that are supposed to be there that aren't? Are there notes that aren't supposed to be there? Are there notes that's supposed to be there but they sound a little choked? We're going to try that next. Okay, now I'm going to put this chord bar onto this harp, push it down, and strum the chord and see if we have the real thing, okay? And this is a Daigle harp. And so the beauty of a Daigle harp is that the bars slide right in. And I'm going to push it down. Now this is not the place where A7 lives. The A7 is going to live in this slot up here. But I've moved it to the bottom so that the tracking distance is as short as possible. When I have bars that are way up here that I'm trying to cut way up here, then I have to track a much longer section of string. Now, I'll talk about that in a minute, okay? Remind me to talk about that. All right, so I'm going to push it down. And that is a correct A7. There's no leaks, and I can see by the width of the notches that none of them are coming close to exposing other strings that you don't want, or that you don't want ringing. So I cut that well, and that's a good one. And that's going to go into its slot up here when I'm done. Now, I wanted to talk about, what was it I wanted to talk about? Oh, one thing you want to watch out for, don't accidentally mark them this way. In other words, don't put them on backwards and then mark them and then cut them, put them on the right way, and then they won't work. You got to make sure that your bass end is to the bass and the treble end is to the treble. Now on my harp, there's a hole on the bass side and a notch on the treble side. Now I want to tell you about some other problems. I want to show you this spot. This felt, this particular felt, is a little thicker than Pete Daigle's standard felt. I have this felt from a different source, and it is older and it is thicker than Pete Daigle felt. There's no advantage or disadvantage to having it thicker. This particular batch is thicker, and that can cause some problems because when I put this on the harp, the mylar springs were not high enough to push the felt up off the strings. And I would let go of the button and the felt would just sit on the strings because the felt was thick and that made the bar a little bit higher. So I either needed longer springs or I needed to what we call shim the comb. and that's what I did. And I'm going to see if I can get a close-up of this comb that has been shimmed. Camera is wiggling around here. If you see underneath, there is about, well, I think it's 3/16 of an inch. In this case, it is cardboard, not corrugated cardboard, because corrugated cardboard will smash down. I have thick, heavy cardboard, like mat board, underneath there. I think that Pete uses plastic, and he has it in different thicknesses, because sometimes stuff needs to be shimmed. Okay, as promised, I told you I was going to tell you some of the problems that can come up when you do your refelting job. And these are things that you don't really see on the other videos, and I wanted to talk to you about them. One of the common problems that I've run into in refelting auto harps over the years is getting different batches of felt that are different thicknesses. And this comes up over a period of time. Most of our felt is made by one manufacturer, and there is variance. Sometimes that variance is ordered, sometimes it is not. But we as consumers on the consumer end, we don't really think about it. We just say, we just order felt. I want 21 strips of felt, or I want a roll of felt for a 21 bar harp. That gets us the right thickness or the right width this way, but we're kind of, whatever we get, we use this way as far as how thick it is. And sometimes it can be thicker than other times. Now, why is that a problem? Well, here's the thing. When we play the auto harp, we play and we use certain chords a lot more than others. And so those other chords may not need to be refelted. So you go, oh, I just have to redo 5 of them. Great. Saves you money, saves you time. So you get your 5 strips of felt, you put them on, and they're not as thick, or they're taller. And so that makes them ride up. I mean, they might be level across the top, but then some of them might still be touching the strings. Or there may be, they push down a different length, different distance as you're playing, and that can be really annoying. All right, so you have to know what you're getting into. Obviously, if you refelt all the bars with the new felt, they're all going to be the same standard, but you can adjust it. If you get felt that is too tall, then you might have to shim up your combs, like I showed you in the previous section. If you get felt that's a lot shorter, you might have to put extra padding down on the inside of your chord bar covers here to push the chord bars down and take up a little bit of that space so that you're not having to push them down quite so far every time, which can be fatiguing. You want that felt to sit just a little bit above the strings, but you don't want them, the strings, when they vibrate, to touch the felts at all, especially in the bass end. Remember I said bass strings move more when they're plucked, so they need room to vibrate. So a lot of times people will set up the felts a little bit like that. I'm exaggerating a lot, but the treble strings are up here and it's closer. The bass strings, they give a little bit more space so that there's room to vibrate, and plus the bass strings are thicker. So instead of straight across, you've got it set up so it's tipped. You can change the angle of that with the padding at each end under the chord bar cover. This one has more padding, this one has less padding, so the springs push it up a little bit further. All of these are little fine micro adjustments that make your harp worth playing. And this is also what the setup person does on your harp to make it more fun to play. So when you buy an optimized harp that's been upgraded, this has been done to it so that a lot of that slack has been taken up and a lot of the angle situations and everything. But when you change the dimensions of the felt, all of that changes and you have to adjust it yourself. All right, so that's one of the problems that can come up. Another problem is, like I said, when you make a mistake, you all of a sudden realize, oh, I cut out a string that's not supposed to be in the chord. Not a problem. You saved your divots, right? See, I've got my divots saved up right here. They're over on my table. And if I made a mistake, I could just put it back in to the chord bar. See if I can show you this. You can take it. You can take your little triangular divot. Doesn't have to be the exact one. Pre-check it, though, so you make sure that it fills up the gap pretty well. See, this one doesn't really fill up the gap very well. There's a lot of space. So you want one that's a pretty good match for the space. Take some glue. You can use a drop of super glue on each side, or a drop of silicone glue, or a drop of rubber cement. Doesn't really matter. You just put a little tiny bit in there and then drop your divot in and squish it in so it's level, and just hold it for a minute. That's all you need. And there's one last thing I want to show you. This is a little trick. This is an extra trick for next time. What I do is I take a marker, in this case a silver Sharpie, because my chord bars are black on the side, and I mark where the notches are. Okay, now I can't do this to the camera, I don't think. Maybe I can. No, I'm not going to try to do that. I'm going to do it here and then turn it around so you can see it. I use the silver so that it shows up against the black. I'm marking on the bar where the notches go so that next time I refelt a year down the road, it'll already be marked. Eh? The only thing that can mess with that is if you change your tuning. Or if you're, say you're going to a diatonic tuning, if you change your string schedule, then the marks are going to be off. But then I just cover them up with black ink. There it is. Just a little extra trick for you because you stayed till the end. That way I'll know and I won't have to mark my bars next time. Eh? Kind of clever. So there you have it. That's a little video on cutting felt. Hope you stayed up with all that. Thanks for watching. I'm Hal Weeks. Remember to like and subscribe. Go over to Patreon and kick in a few bucks. Keep this all going. It really helps me a lot. We'll see you next time on Stalking the Wild Autoharp. Bye.